week at the end of church, the kids were all over here, and we had them drawing pictures. And they were drawing pictures of things that were in their dreams. So I didn't keep them, I let them take them home. But I'm going to tell you, Erie, he drew a wrist with a watch on it. A very deep thinker, I think. Now, Maury's picture was a little bit different. I don't have one of his, but Maury's picture was a little bit different because his page was full of all sorts of different things. Little things here, there, and everywhere. And it kind of reminded me a bit of our dreams, because sometimes our dreams are little bits of this, little bits of that, all sorts of things, things you recognise, things you don't. Put it all together, and it's nonsense. It's just a complete mess, and that's what his dream was. Now, Kina's dream, the very first thing she said to me was, I'm going to draw rainbow and unicorns. So that was Kina's dream, rainbow and unicorns. Now, my dream is a bit different. My dream was full of, guess what, ice cream. It had a cup of coffee, it had chocolate, that was my dream. And then David came over and he said, you know what my dream would be? Lots and lots of money. Now, we don't really know if our dreams have any meaning at all. And we certainly don't know how to interpret our dreams. That just means how to find out what they mean. They really probably don't have much useful meaning at all. But sometimes what we call dreams, what David and I said wasn't really our dreams, that was our wish list. Sometimes we get an idea of something that we really want, and some of these things are never going to happen. Like, realistically, we're never going to climb a rainbow on the back of a unicorn. That really isn't going to happen, Kina. It's a nice dream, but it's not really going to happen. And as for whether we're going to have ice cream and lots of money, who knows? These things on our wish list, they may happen, they may not happen. But what we do know is, we do know that God has a plan for our lives. God has a good plan for our lives. Most often we don't really know what that is. Sometimes we might have ideas and ambitions, and it's not wrong to have those ideas and those ambitions for our lives, but we do need to come before God and ask Him to open up the way for the things that He wants us to do, and close the doors for the things that we want to do that He really doesn't want us to do. What we have to do is trust God. But that isn't always easy, because sometimes bad or difficult things happen in our lives. And I don't think that God gives us bad things, but sometimes He does allow us to have bad things come into our lives, things that are hard to cope with. Maybe you're struggling in school and you've got big exams or something to do, and you think, why do I have to do this? Sometimes God allows us to go through things in our lives to teach us to wait and have patience, or to teach us to trust God and rely on Him. So sometimes that's why those things happen. Remember Joseph that we've been thinking about? Well, we know that Joseph had some bad things happen in his life. Can you remember any of the bad things that happened to Joseph then? Pardon? He went to jail. That's right, that was one of the bad things that happened. Well done, Gordon even had a picture of that. Can you think of any of the other bad things that happened to Joseph? He was lied about. That's right. Potiphar's wife told lies about him and he ended up in jail. What did his brothers do? They put him in a great big hole, a big deep pit, and then somebody came along and took him away and he was sold as a slave. So lots of things that happened to Joseph that really weren't very nice things at all. But what did Joseph do? He trusted God. That is our part of God's plan for us. All we have to do is trust God. Do our best in whatever situation we're in and trust God. Now, if you remember at the end of last week, Joseph, we talked about, was in prison. And he was able to tell two other prisoners the meanings of their dreams. Well, actually, he said, I can't do that. It's God can do it. And he told them the meaning of their dreams, and their dreams came true exactly as God had told Joseph what the meaning of their dreams was. And so the butler ended up going back and working in the palace along when the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, butler, went back to work with him. And before he went, Joseph said, when you go and you're working for Pharaoh, don't forget about me. If you speak to Pharaoh about me, maybe he will let me out of prison. You see, Joseph thought, maybe this is God's plan. Maybe this is God's plan for my life, how I'm going to get out of prison. See, we have to be very careful, because sometimes we get ideas in our head, and because it's something that we really want, we convince ourselves, we tell ourselves this is what God's plan for our life must be. I want it so much. God must want this for me as well. But be careful, because God's plan will happen His way and in His time. Because actually what happened, the butler did go back and work for Pharaoh. He got what he wanted, so then he completely forgot about Joseph. Joseph was left in prison, all alone, in a strange country, in prison, forgotten about. And 2 whole years went past. Joseph had thought to himself, the butler, he can speak to Pharaoh and I can get out of prison. 2 years later, he's still in prison, forgotten about. Until one night, Pharaoh had a dream. In fact, Pharaoh had 2 dreams. And he was a bit worried about the dreams. He didn't know what they meant, and he desperately tried to find someone who could tell him what his dreams meant. And he was so upset, he was getting more and more anxious because no one could tell him what his dreams meant. And suddenly, the butler remembered Joseph. And he said to Pharaoh, do you remember the time that you put me in prison? I met a young man there, and he was able to tell me the meaning of my dreams. Well, right away, Pharaoh sent for Joseph. Joseph came to the palace, and Pharaoh said to him, I've heard that you could tell me what my dreams mean. Now, if you were in front of the king, would you be brave enough to say what Joseph said? He said, no, I can't do that, but God can. So Pharaoh told Joseph what his 2 dreams were like. He said, in my first dream, I saw 7 great, big, healthy-looking, lovely, fat cows, and they just appeared coming up out of the river Nile. And then immediately after that, 7 more cows appeared, but they were ugly and thin. They didn't look very nice at all. And guess what? They ate up all the good cows, all the fat, healthy cows. The thin, ugly ones, ate them all up. And he said, I woke up. But eventually I fell back asleep again, and I had another dream. And he said, this time in my dream, I saw a stalk of corn growing in the ground. And on the stalk there were 7 heads of grain. 7 fat, juicy heads of grain. And the next thing, there were 7 more heads of grain appeared, but they were thin and withered. They didn't look very good at all, and they swallowed up the good grain. Joseph, tell me what this means. Well, Joseph said, God has given you 2 dreams with the same meaning, and He has done that to tell you something, and He says to you today, this is what's going to happen. He said for 7 years, this country of Egypt is going to have a really good harvest. In fact, it's going to have a fantastic harvest. The best harvest you have ever seen for 7 years. But after that, there will be 7 years of famine. A famine is when there is no food. No food for the people to eat. No food to feed the animals, so the animals can't give them food either. And Joseph said, today you should appoint someone wise, someone sensible, someone honest and clever, who can, during the years of good harvest, they can collect 1/5 of all of the crops and all of the food, store it away, organise it so it's all stored and ready for when the famine comes. Then there will be food for the people. Pharaoh said to Joseph, that sounds like a really good idea, and God has given me this, the meaning of my dream. God has given me the idea of this plan. So Joseph, he said, I am going to put you in charge. So Joseph, who had been a forgotten prisoner for those last 2 years, and all the other things that had happened to him before, now Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave him fine robes to wear, a gold chain around his neck, gave him a chariot to ride in, and the king gave him his very own ring. And that ring was a symbol of authority. Everyone in Egypt would know that Joseph was in charge. So what did Joseph do? As always, he trusted God and did his best. So he ordered barns and stores to be built. Every city had its own stores, and he gathered all of the spare and extra grain, just as God had said. And eventually, after 7 years, the crops failed. Not only was there not a good harvest, there was no harvest. No food for anyone to eat, no food for the animals. The people cried to Pharaoh and said, "We're hungry." Pharaoh said, "Go to Joseph and do exactly as he tells you." So now was the time. Joseph opened all the barns, opened all the stores in each city, and everyone was able to go and buy the food that they needed. Not only was there enough food for all of the land of Egypt, but there was enough food that they could sell to the neighbouring countries as well. And all this happened because Joseph trusted God, followed God's plan, his way, and in his time. And once again, God gave Joseph success with everything that he did. Next week, we'll probably have the last part of the story of Joseph. It's not over yet. So, now we're going to sing "He's Got My Life in the Palm of His Hand." You probably remember that from the last few weeks. We should be starting to know how to be able to do all the actions. Actually, I want to do the actions up here. If you're not doing that, come on. We can, if you're not sure, you can follow there. Remember? And you, I think you should remember to do it, right?